actually 2 years ago that we heard the Sunday school classes were no longer going to be held right now, and because of COVID.
The first couple of weeks, the pivot was, no church, and then it was church from here, but eventually it became church from the James River campus again. So we had John doing his thing. We just were watching it from our living room.
Certainly at my age, virtual whatever didn't ring much of a bell. So, I just thought that, well, we'll see what happens, but I don't know how that's going to work.
We lost a lot. We lost a lot relevant to Richard Public Schools, where I have the privilege of serving on the school board. That's been well documented, and I'm sure historians will speak to it for a long time, not just pertinent to academics, but also socio-emotional welfare. I think the same can be said, at least relevant to the latter, here at Bon Air.
It did disappoint me just a little bit, since we couldn't get close and talk to our friends that much.
It was a very scary and unsettling time. Not knowing what was going on or how long this would go on, and so I think everybody kind of went through that, and it was a time of being kind of alone and cut off from people, and so of course missed being a part of the church community during that time.
There's a loss when you can't see people face to face.
The worship is one thing, but the relationships form before church, after church, meeting in the halls, whatever, and we lost that. And we're never going to get that back. I mean, that time is gone.
Well, what in the world has happened? I don't know about you, but I feel like Rip Van Winkle. When I lived in one world when COVID hit, and somehow or another, I woke up in another world I don't even remotely recognize. Do you have that same experience? I mean, I went asleep and the church still was a trusted place in community, and I woke up and all of a sudden, we're held in high suspicion. How did we get here? Not only that, what has happened to everybody? I go to the restaurant and sorry, we're understaffed. You see for hire sales everywhere you go. Where did everybody go? Call a service group to come work in your house. Well, we'll be there in a month. A month? Airline industry, understaffed. Go buy a new car. I love this one. Great choice. You can pick it up in 12 months. You mean I can't go out on the, we don't have any cars out there on the lot. Everything has changed. Inflation. I'm even looking up recipes for Spam. I have never done that before. Global anxiety. War in Ukraine. War potentially happening in the east between China and Taiwan. Storms, have they ever been more angrier than they are right now? Just what we went through this past week, the pictures of destruction are unnerving of what's happened. And what's our response to all that? It would be appropriate to experience some despair. That's okay. Confusion. How in the world did all this happen so fast in a matter of a couple of years? Angry? Man, there are a lot of people angry right now. Get on the highway. It's a war zone out there on the highway. All kinds of blame going on right now. This party blaming that party, this group blaming that group. And we're all convinced that this is not going to change anytime soon. Have you had any of these emotions or thoughts? Well, if you have, say hello to Elijah. Because we just met Elijah. It was just read to us in 1 Kings chapter 19. And where do we find him? All curled up in a fetal position under a broom tree, wishing to die. That's how we meet him. Now, how did he get here? Well, the king and queen, Ahab and Jezebel, had started a state religion, and they had set up altars all over Israel, and people were crowding in. It's a religion of Baal. It's a worship of prosperity and fertility and wealth and growth, and it was the state religion. And Jezebel had issued a decree that if anyone stood against it, they would be executed. Elijah stood against it. The fire of God came down and killed 450 prophets of Baal, 400 prophets of Asherah. God demonstrated who was the true God. Jezebel heard about that, and she said, by tomorrow, that man is dead. And he runs. He runs as far as he can and as fast as he can until he falls exhausted onto a scraggly broom tree. And he cries out in despair, Lord God, enough. For Pete's sake, enough. Just let me die. How did Elijah get there? Great Scott, man. You just saw the power of God in the previous chapter. He just wiped out 450 prophets, 850 altogether. He demonstrated his power right in front of you. Not only that, you have heard the voice of God speak directly to you. How do you go from such a spiritual high to such an emotional low and despair so fast, Elijah? Well, before we sit in judgment of him, maybe we take account for ourselves. Folk, in our lifetime, the church has never thrived better. 1950s, 60s, 70s, the church grew like a weed. It grew so much, we started calling churches mega churches. And all that right up to just a few years ago. And now all of a sudden, we're sitting under our own broom tree and we're contemplating the death of the church? Really? This is the crisis of the tree. It's a crisis of futility. It's a grief for all that we cannot change in our lives, for all we cannot change in the lives of our loved ones, for all that we cannot change in the life of the world. The world will drive you to the crisis of the tree. And we become just like Elijah. We retreat. We shut out the world. We go in our cave. And we sleep. I think I just described the Church of North America pretty well right now. What do we need? Deb and I were missionaries in Taiwan. We were there when the first Japanese department store came into the country. And you know what they introduced? Not only new lines of clothes, they introduced something called the escalator. Deb was so excited about going to the department store and buying clothes that actually fit people our size that we dashed off and went to the department store, and I lost her. She was in seventh heaven buying clothes for the kids. I wore out much more quickly than she did, so I decided I'd try to find something fun. You know what's fun to do? Watch someone try to use an escalator for the first time in their life. That's quite entertaining. So I go over to the escalator and I just hang out and I watch this little dude about 5 years old who spotted a toy section on the second floor. He wanted to go up to that toy section and he got on the escalator. The problem was he got on the side of the escalator that didn't go up. He got on the side that came down. And after 2 or 3 steps on the escalator, he found himself right back where he started from. Well, as a Christian, I should have gone to help him, but I was there for entertainment. I wanted to see what he was going to do. Well, he was pretty clever. He figured walking up that thing wasn't going to accomplish it. He would try running. And he took off and he ran and he did well. I found myself down there cheering for him. In Chinese, you go, Jai-yo, Jai-yo, which gives it gas, give it gas. He got halfway up. I was impressed, only to wear out and come all the way back down. But then I saw his eyes and his eyebrows furrow. Ooh, he's got a plan. This is going to be good. He backs up. Gets a good run, runs halfway up about where he was before, knew he would tire. He decided he was going to take a break. You know how you take a break on an escalator? You put your hands on the rails, you throw your feet up on the rails, and you take a break. But he discovered handrails on escalators come all the way back down, and he wound up at the bottom, jumped off, cried, and I hear this deep voice, God, Ma, which is Dad going, what in the world is going on? And Dad comes around the corner, looks at the escalator and looks at the boy and looks at me and says this in Mandarin. I didn't know they said this. Takes after his mother's side of the family. The last I see of that little guy is the dad taking him by the hand, leading him to the other side, and a big smile on his face, going up the escalator the right way. We're like that little boy right now. For all we've tried, and we've given it our best run, we feel like we're right back where we started from. What we need is a Father to come and take us by the hand and show us the way.
It took us a couple of weeks, if not a couple of months, to realize, okay, this is the new normal, and we're going to have to lean into it as opposed to just be twiddling our thumbs waiting for things to go, quote, back to normal, because there wasn't any going back. It was how do we move forward?
We would start a conference call the Sunday that we stopped. And that's what we did. We had about 14 men in the class, and I think about 8 came on that first Sunday to the conference call.
I was a widow, and then, already it was a time of loneliness and loss, and then COVID hit. Fortunately, during all of that, I was able to meet somebody special and find love for my life again. And so, yeah, we got married. We met during COVID and then later got married during the time of COVID. So that was unique.
God always is present, even in the worst of times. And that was no less true during the pandemic.
Yeah, we did learn a lot. We did a bunch of crafts more. We did more crafts than we did do a lot of math from time to time.
The fact that they can say, "Good morning, Joyce. Good morning, Louise," and that helped them feel that and cut away some of the loneliness that they felt during the week.
At the James River campus, we're awfully involved and engaged with Bridging RVA, which is a nonprofit that John and Leanne have been involved with. And Bridging RVA stepped up and did the food deliveries. And a lot of our campus got involved with that. And so God showed up there and enabled us to touch a lot of lives, not just the people who we took food to, but the people who took the food. It touched a lot of their lives.
One of our members was there, John Brennan, and he wanted to be on. He wasn't in the class, but we knew him and he knew us, so he came on, and he began to involve others from Morningside. So we are affecting a nursing home that would not be able to do this if we weren't on a telephone call.
We decided to have a virtual wedding, really. And so through the help of several at Bon Air, we were able to have a small wedding in the courtyard with just us and the folks leading the service. And through our church's internet connection, and we were able to have our friends and family join virtually. I think we were the first virtual wedding for Bon Air. So that live web feed was wonderful as a way for our family and friends to participate.
Well, somebody wakes Elijah up. An angel pokes him. Elijah, get up and eat. And so Elijah rolls over, and there beside him by his head is a steaming hot loaf of bread. That's a nice way to wake up. A jar of water. He eats, he drinks, and you know what he does? He goes back to sleep. Angel waits for a little bit longer, pokes him again. Elijah, get up and eat. You need to take some strength, my friend, because you're going to need this strength for the journey ahead. Journey ahead. What journey ahead? I'm not on a journey. I'm at the end of the road. There's nowhere else for me to go. I'm not on a journey of any kind. This is the opposite of a journey. This is the end. This isn't the beginning of anything. And the angel says, no, that's not true, Elijah. You've been running, you've been fleeing, you've been running so hard to escape and get away. It's now time that you turn and start moving towards something. You meant for this to be an escape. God's going to turn this into a pilgrimage. You're on a journey, my brother. So you eat, you live, and let's move on. How do you move on? Well, it starts with affirmation. It starts with taking care of yourself. It starts with sleep. It starts with rest. It starts with taking care of your body. Be Elijah. Give yourself some rest right now. We've been through a lot. Give yourself some peace. Take care of yourself. It's okay to do that. Nurture yourself. Better than spam, I hope. Get on with the life that is now yours to live. And remember, he who watches over Israel neither slumbers nor sleeps. He who watches over you neither slumbers or sleeps. This is how you can take rest. This is how you can take time to care for yourself, because love is watching over you no matter what is going on in this world. We do what we have to do to be able to move on. So Elijah moves on. Is he happy? Absolutely no. Is he hopeful? Absolutely not. But he moves. What's interesting is where he goes. He goes to the only place he knows where he can encounter God, where he might hear the very voice of God. He goes 40 days. He goes to Mount Horeb. Now, Mount Horeb is another name for Mount Sinai. And this is the holiest place he knows to go to hear from God. This is the place that Moses saw the burning bush. This is the place that Moses took the children of God to that place and was given the 10 Commandments and the law by which the people were to live by. This is the place when the world got a new life after the flood. This is the place that had a cave where Moses was in the cave, and when he stepped out of the cave, God physically and literally passed by him. This is the most holy place that Elijah knows to go. And so he goes there waiting to hear a word from God, and he hears a word from God. And this is what God says. Elijah, what are you doing here? Now, if you read it in Hebrew, it actually says, Elijah, what are you doing here discouraged? Well, Elijah didn't exactly like that question. He responds. He's angry. You know what he wants to hear? He wants to hear something like this. Well done, Elijah. Man, you took on all those prophets of Baal and Asherah. You wiped them out single-handedly, all by yourself, 850 of them. Well done, my friend. He wanted to hear that. He wanted to hear something like, be of good courage. I will be with you no matter what. That's what Elijah wants to hear. What does he hear? What are you doing here? And the Lord says, step out of that cave. I'm going to pass by. And a great wind comes. Matter of fact, that wind was so strong it split mountains and it crushed rocks. We saw the power of wind just a couple days ago, didn't we? But God wasn't in that wind. Earthquake. The entire ground and world to him was shaken. But God was not in that. Fire. That's the very fire that came down and consumed the altar of Baal. The power of God was in that fire. But God was not in that. Elijah was wondering, why isn't the voice of the Lord in the fire and the earthquake and the wind? You do know that's how God spoke to Moses on that mountain. He spoke to Moses in the wind and the fire and the earthquake. Why isn't God speaking to me, he's thinking Elijah? He spoke to Moses that way. Why isn't he speaking to me that way? We can identify. You know what Elijah's wanting to do? He wants things to go back to the way they were. This is the way you did it before, Lord. Now, isn't that the way you're going to do it now? That's how you led your people back then. Isn't that how you're going to lead us now? He actually thought that they could return back to the way things were. This is the crisis of the cave. Things can't go back to the way they were. God will speak to him not in the wind, not in the earthquake, not in the fire, but in a whisper, in the silence. Listen, Elijah, I have something new I want to say to you. I have a new way I want to shape you now. Church, people of God, this is a moment to listen. I am shaping you through all you have been through in a new way for a new day. I was at the airport early morning. It was a crowded flight. Everyone was anxious to get on the plane. Still dark outside. When the announcement came over the speakers, flight will be delayed. Dense fog at the airport. Airport's been shut down. Be no flights coming in, no flights going out. We don't know how long. We'll be delayed here. Wow, was there a reaction among the flight, the crew, the people flying? One guy jumped up, ran to the counter. Poor gal working behind the counter. I did a prayer for her. She was going to get blistered, and she did. And that guy jumped up. I'm a professor. I've got to go deliver this paper. I've been looking forward to delivering this paper for months. This is quite a big honor in my career. I have got to get there. You've got to get me there. Right behind him was a woman with a screaming child. She'd been screaming all morning long. She said, look, I've traveled all the way here by flying. I have one more leg to get home. My child has been screaming. I'm miserable. I'm tired. The child's miserable. Is there any flight you can get me on to get out of here? Right behind her was a guy who says, I've got to make a client visit. My aide, my assistant is there, but he can't handle this client. This client's our major client. I have got to get there and do the presentation. How can you get me there? Wow, what a morning. We sat there for hours. By the time the fog lifted and the traffic started catching up, we were there for hours. When it was all over, I was sitting by the professor, got a text. We read your paper since you couldn't be here. Well done. You got a standing ovation. He looked at me and he said, you know, if I'd been there giving academic competition, nobody would have stood. Wow, that really went well. I looked over at the mother, and the child was fast asleep. First time they'd slept in 24 hours. She was just cooing away. You know, if I'd gotten on that plane, she said, that baby would have never gone to sleep. The businessman, wow, my assistant knocked a home run. The client said, we're thrilled. We're going to stay with you guys. All went well. And you know what was interesting? Everybody got their clearest thinking in the middle of the densest fog. God is speaking in a whisper. You can't go back to the way it was. I'm shaping you in a new way.
For what we went through with that experience, maybe it helps us appreciate more the opportunity to be together. I know for me and Carl, we really have valued hearing the music live again. While it was great online, it wasn't the same as being in the room, experiencing the music, experiencing the worship.
Get back together and do more stuff now that there's not COVID anymore. Well, I mean, there is still COVID, but still we can get closer to each other.
If ever there was a role for Bonnier Baptist Church, boy, now is it here and now. I mean, my proposition is that Bonnier Baptist Church is needed in our schools more than ever. I'm grateful to Bonnier, to all of our members for what we do, but I can tell you this, school systems cannot do it alone. In fact, they've demonstrated that, to be blunt, they're failing. It's the church. It's this church in particular that's making the difference.
So I look at how we do church and realize we can't just, okay, it's over, let's go back to where we were. Church was not on a good trajectory in terms of attendance and participation and touching people's lives. And, you know, it was all about us being in the building. And the pandemic taught us the church is not about the building. It's about the community and the role we serve in community. So it gave us permission to realize it's not always about just showing up on Sundays. It's about being the church the other 6.5 days of the week.
We're back, and we're better than ever. I'm confident we're going to be here for another 70 years, and God bless Bonnier Baptist Church for what it does, and what I'm confident will continue to do.
We're not going back. There's no going back to the before times. We have, in fact, the pandemic kind of fast-forwarded us to a future.
God's asking us this question this morning. What are you doing here? And if you're discouraged, what in the world are you doing here discouraged? And I loved Elisha's response to this a second time. Seems to have a broken record thing going on here. I've been very, very zealous for you, Lord. I mean, all your people have forsaken you. The prophets have forsaken you. The children of Israel have forsaken you. Now I and I alone am left. And they're after me. Well, I love what God does. You know what God does? Ignores it. You got a new mission, Elijah. I want you to go and anoint 2 kings. I've got a mission for you, Elijah. I want you to go and I want you to anoint your successor, Elisha. I want you to go right now, and I want you to go and do just that. God's first word is to remind us that we have a new purpose. and we have a new mission. That's what God does at moments like this. And he is whispering that to each one of you and to our congregation. And we have to give a response. Now, there's two kinds of response. And it's critical which of the two we offer. I remember one summer when I was in college, I worked at Warrington Baptist Church, and I stayed with a family for 10 weeks. I was the summer youth person at the church, and I stayed with this family for 10 weeks. I drove up to the house. I'd never seen a house that big before. It was beautiful. It had Black Angus cattle feeding in the fields, the white fences that just lined the outline of the property. It was gorgeous. The wife came out and met me and welcomed me to the home, said, this will be your home for 10 weeks. I hope you have a suit handy. The governor's coming over for dinner tonight. I went, wow, this is going to be nice. She takes me into the room where I'm going to stay, my bedroom. I never had such a large bedroom. It even had a bath attached. I had to call my mom. Mom, you won't believe this. My bedroom has a bathroom attached. You're kidding me. My mom and dad didn't even have that. We're going to come up and visit you. Well, please, you won't believe this place. Gave me the tour of the house, took me to my favorite room in the house, which is the kitchen, and she opened up the refrigerator. It was stocked, and she said, you just help yourself. Man, I had died and gone to heaven. Now, do you think I made myself at home in that home as much as I'd like to? Do you think I hit that refrigerator a fraction of what crossed this mind to hit that refrigerator? Not at all. My mother would have killed me. I was a guest in that home, and I needed to act like a guest. Compare that to the time that Deb and I bought a home. And I'm carrying a box of stuff up the steps into the house, and I noticed Deb in the living room, and she's putting a nail in the wall at an unusual place. And I said, what picture are you planning to hang there? She said, I don't know. Well, why are you putting a nail there? Because I can. What do you mean, because you can? John, this is our house. We've been living in parsonages up to then, or living in the mission field and mission housing. But this was our house, and I could put a nail here, I could put a nail there, I can put a nail anywhere I want to. We own this home. And I'm going, no, we don't. The bank owns 90% of this home. And this was her response. But it's our name at the bottom of that deed. Lord, I invite you into my life. Is he been invited in to be a guest? You'll honor that. If there's only one room he gets to be comfortable in, the Sunday room, he'll honor that. Have we invited him as a guest into our lives? Have we said to the Lord, here is the deed of my life. I want your name at the bottom of this deed. There's a difference, folk. And it will make all the difference in how we go after this new mission that God has for each one of us and for Bonaire Baptist Church. But that's not all that God does. God says, well, wait a minute, Elijah. Did I just hear you say, it is I and I alone that's left? Step out this cave. Take a look. You're not alone at all. There's 7,000 others out there ready to take this journey with you. You miscounted by 6,999. You are not alone. Yes, this world is terrible, but it's not as terrible as you think. There are wonderful people here in this room with you and everywhere around this world. They're going to take the journey. The voice of God gives us purpose and a new mission. The voice of God gives us each other and kindred, literally all over the world. So this morning, where does this find you? Are you under the tree of despair? That's okay. Express to God what you must. Take care of yourself. Rest. Care for you. Does it find you in the cave in a time of silence when you just are so confused, nothing's making sense? Feel emotionally all curled up? Then listen. There's a whisper coming your way. God is shaping you in a new way right now. For 70 years, God has led the people of Bon Air Baptist Church. You're not alone. You have a new purpose. God is forming a new community with us to help lives be changed and to help change our world. And the world is hungry. It's in despair. It's hopeless. It doesn't know if matters of faith are real anymore or not. The world's confused. What God has in mind for the world is you. Are you in?